Inside Abode, ladies and gentlemen, how are y'all doing? My name is Dave Jones. I'm your host, and we have another podcast this week. It is like what we're trying to do is give you as much value as possible, especially as we're in this spring market and things have picked up for us, and we're seeing more transactions just naturally because that's just the flow of our industry. But this is the true value of a realtor series, and in this series, we're trying to we're trying to tell you and educate you on some of the things that you may not know that are typically not talked about at the depth that what we're talking about them. So if you are a buyer or seller or just someone that's listening, you might be another real estate agent trying to learn something. You might just be an experienced agent that wants to hear what's going on or what people are talking about right now. That's what this is about. So anyway, hit that subscribe button. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. We try to drop valuable content for you. And yes, it could save you thousands of dollars if you listen to this podcast maybe at some point. I don't know, but that's the goal. We're trying to help you out. Anyway, today we're going to talk about contingencies, and we have our special guest today, Abode, Spencer Eiseman. How are you doing, Spencer?
I'm doing great today. I mean, with this weather, who can complain? I'm sitting here just looking at the water from our office, so I cannot complain.
Yep.
So specifically today, Dave brought me here to talk about home sale contingencies because there are a ton of contingencies available in our Northwest MLS as far as forms go. But I think a hot topic right now is definitely home sale contingencies.
Okay. Yeah. So tell me, first, tell the audience a little bit about yourself before we jump into that. I want to listen.
Oh, yeah.
Who are you?
So my name is Spencer Eiseman. I'm a broker here at Windermere Abode. I've been a licensed agent in the South Sound since 2018. Bounced around in a bunch of different roles in the industry, but I'm a solo broker here at Abode now.
Yeah,
Third year strong.
Nice. Yeah, and killing it, man. You're really, I don't know. It's been fun to watch. 30 under 30. Weren't you 30 under 30? You were 30 under 30
Almost
nominated.
finalist. I was a finalist.
Yeah. You were
But
the humble
yeah, I
king.
sit on our DEI committee here at Tacoma Pierce County Association of Realtors. I'm also on the Washington Realtors DEI committee, and then I'm vice president of the LGBTQ plus Real Estate Alliance Western Washington chapter. So
That's
I
a
do quite a
lot.
bit outside of my
Yeah.
work.
Yes, you do. That's a lot. All right. So back to contingencies, because I know that you said you've been seeing these a lot. So what is a home sale contingency? They're a thing in this market, you said?
I mean, they're a thing in any market, but in a scenario where interest rates are high and it's a squeeze for anybody to get into a home, let alone try and get from one home and into the next. There's a lot of different things you gotta weigh there. So I'd say yes, we are seeing, or at least I'm seeing home sale contingencies in the market, especially when I'm representing sellers. I
Mm,
oftentimes see them much more than working with buyers.
yeah. So like I'm a home seller. I'm coming to you. Like why should I worry about contingencies? Like what is that? Like does it mean that
Yeah, so home sale contingency basically means that a buyer needs to sell their current home in order to qualify financially to buy their
okay,
next home. A lot of
okay.
times you'll see a home sale contingency in a move-up buyer pool, people trying to get from their first home into their next home where they can capitalize on their equity or just make that next step into home ownership.
Yeah. That sounds kind of hard. Like, what's the difference between let's say what if, like, just what if I am living in my home right now and we find a home, we find a home and we do have to sell our home. Don't I have like I know they have like 5 days. Like if let's say we find a home and we put an offer in and it gets accepted, we have like 5 days,
Mhm.
right, to get our home on the market or something like that.
5 days is the default. I mean, if I was on the listing side representing a seller, I would want to see that much quicker. I would also
Yeah.
much rather see that home already be on the market
Okay.
instead of
So
not on the market.
yeah. So basically, you're saying that gets me to my next question. What's the difference between like a home sale contingency where the buyer's home is already under contract and one where it isn't? So like let's say I do find that home, and my home is, you said that you'd prefer it be on the market already, right? So what if it
Yeah.
was under contract already, and then I go and look for a, a home and get under contract on that? Like, what's the
I
difference
feel
between
like
the
that's
two?
your top tier home sale contingent offer. Like your
Okay.
offer is contingent on your current home selling, and just the fact that you already have it under contract would be definitely more appealing from the seller's point of view,
Okay.
just because there's a little more guarantee that that home sale is actually going to close so that this one can close. That makes sense.
Okay. What would be the lowest scale of a contingent situation?
I would
Like,
say just one like where you're talking about if you're trying to go after a house, your house isn't technically on the market yet. You're trying to
mm-hmm,
weigh how many days you can negotiate to get it on the market after they take your offer contingent. I
mm-hmm,
mean, there's a ton of things to consider. I mean, purchasing a home is probably one of the most stressful things you can do, and then
yeah.
you sell and buy at the same time. It adds a lot of
Yeah.
extra
Yeah.
nuances and forms to consider. And just this one home sale contingency form references another 6 or 7 forms in our MLS that we need to use
Oh.
in accordance with it.
So what? So do you advise like someone who wants to sell their home not use a realtor if they are doing contingent sell? Like that could get kind of sticky. I would imagine if I'm doing a FISBO and I'm trying to buy another house and it's all this whole contingency situation.
Absolutely, yeah. There's so many things to consider. I think another unique thing about our market too is that our first-time home buyer range is steadily increasing year over year.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
value is constantly higher for first-time buyers to try and get into. But we have a lot of military folks and just a lot of migration happening too. So people are naturally needing to sell properties in other states before they can buy here. And then you
Okay.
got to worry about all the different rules between different states and their forms and how their listings are doing just in a different state. So there's just a ton of different factors here.
Yeah, sounds like it. So from a seller's perspective, what do I want to see in a contingency offer? We're selling the home, someone comes to us and they have an offer and it's a contingent offer. What are you telling your sellers that you want to see that's the most advantageous? So like let's say that the house is, for example, like are you looking at the condition of the house? Are you looking at how it's marketed and stuff like that? Like, I don't know, like if I'm a seller, because that is a big deal going with taking a contingent offer and going under contract with a contingent offer, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
So I guess, I mean, the baseline, when you accept a contingent offer, your home is still technically on the market. If you're on the listing side, the seller side, your home is
okay.
technically still on the market, but in a contingent status. So one, when you're a seller accepting a contingent offer and going into that status, you are getting a significantly less market exposure because people
Mm,
think that house is already spoken for. There's a
got
contingent
it.
offer
Got
in
it.
place. So what do we have to do to beat that out? There's only a few different ways that you can actually bump that contingency and hopefully overtake it if you're a different
Okay.
buyer, I mean. So on the selling side, I want every single other term aside from that home sale contingency to be very strong. Like I want the earnest
Mm,
money to be the most that it can be. I want all the other terms to be pretty competitive and like I'd almost say ballsy if you're trying to take a home contingent into contingent status, especially if it's in the first couple weeks of it being on the market.
yeah, that's a good point. Because and I would imagine like if it's me and and someone's coming to me saying, "Hey, I'm gonna sell my thing over here, and you need to wait for me to sell this in order for this to work out." I'm gonna be like, "All right, well, what you selling? Let me see it. Like, what's up? Is it staged? Like, is
Yeah.
it not staged? Or like, how many days have you been on? What are you selling it at? Like, let's look at the like." I don't know, like, are you doing a good job selling it? Like,
hmm
I'm now all of a sudden tied to the performance of you guys selling your thing, and that's kind of a big. I don't know. That's a jump.
It's a
That's a
lot of
jump.
extra stress to take
It's
on for
trust.
sure.
It's trust.
Trust,
I got to
stress, all the
trust you.
things. Yeah.
Hmm.
So you want to make sure that other agent is like definitely professionally equipped to represent their clients. You want to make sure you're dealing
Hmm.
with a competent agent on the other side of things too. So I want to make sure that person is very communicative and is submitting a clean offer for one. That's like
Yeah.
step number one.
Yeah.
A little sweetener, I mean, I would tell my sellers that we need to ask for. a market analysis on that home they're trying to
Mm,
sell. I want to see
hmm.
pictures of it. I want to know how much equity that homeowner has. There's just so many other things to consider if you're on the
Yeah.
selling side.
Yeah. No, that's interesting because you're basically, yeah, the trust that we talked about. You know what was crazy? Like we were seeing multiple contingencies, like house of cards type stuff. Like, so you'd have a contingent offer on a contingent offer on a contingent offer. You know what I'm saying? Like they would stack up.
Yeah.
And I've seen that a few times. Not a lot, but I've seen it a few times where, like
Hmm.
this buyer comes and has to sell their house, and that offer was a contingent offer because that person had to sell their house. So it's this long chain of like
Yeah.
houses that have to sell in order for the last one to be even accept
Well, and in that
sold.
scenario too, let's say you are the buyer and your offer was accepted contingent on a listing. That seller now has the ability to say either yes or no to any contingent offer you might receive on your listing.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Good
they get a
point.
little power in negotiation here or negotiation say for that listing too.
I agree with that too. Like I think that they should, because they're at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence and making sure that everyone's doing their job to get the house sold. Like we are, obviously we know the market is the market and you can't control that, but all the things that a seller can control and an agent that's representing that seller can control,
Yeah.
you want to be doing those things to hopefully get a buyer
Hmm.
into to buy it. Um, so what about from like a buyer's perspective? Like what strategies can be effective? Like, so now you're representing a buyer that's coming in. The buyer has a home. You mentioned earlier about
Hmm.
like being on the market already. You would like that because like kind of being up against the gun for 5 days to get your house on the market a lot.
Yeah.
What other things would you tell your buyer, like what strategies can be effective to make their offer more appealing to that as a contingent offer?
Yeah, it honestly depends on like what type of buyer persona you might be fitting into. Like, let's say you're a first
Mm,
time homeowner, you've been in your home for a couple years, built some nice equity. I would expect for you to go through pretty much the whole listing process and know what it's going to look
mm,
like to get your home on the market, how much money you're likely going to net, and like having a pricing plan in place so that if you are planning to put a contingent offer out there in the market, that you're well equipped to get your home sold as quickly as
yeah,
possible and be able to prove it to that seller with
yeah,
all the stats and things that you need to back it up.
yeah. No, that makes
And if
sense.
I mean, frankly, I would try and weigh every option before doing a home sale contingency in order to get
Mhm.
your offer accepted. Like if there's other routes you can take that might be easier, I think you might have a little bit more of a competitive edge with your offer naturally.
Yeah, because as we talked about, the seller is putting a lot of trust in you to do the thing that you're promising to do, which is get the house sold, right? So that we can sell our house. I
Hmm.
mean, that does take some trust. I would say. I would think.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I've come across a scenario where I'm representing the seller and we have a
Hmm.
buyer that's talking about putting a contingent offer in, but their home's listed in another state and they have another agent they're working
Oh,
with. So there's two houses being sold, but three agents in the works, and I don't get to
wow.
talk directly to that agent technically. So how do I know what they're
Yeah,
doing? So
yeah,
there's a lot of things that could happen or scenarios that could come into play.
yeah.
And I
And
think
I
just
like.
naturally, I guess in the springtime, as our inventory ticks up, that's your opportunity to try and get a contingent offer accepted because
Right,
then you can get your home on the market quickly too and hopefully have the same
100%.
buyer activity. But
Yeah, I mean that. Yeah, and I'm just trying to think about like if I'm listening to this and I'm someone who doesn't understand what a contingency is there anything else that people should look out for that you think or that you're passionate about when it comes to a contingent offer? Are there any other factors that play in? Like I would have to imagine like the relationships between the agents play in because like
I would think so, yeah.
I don't know,
And
I
I
just feel
would,
like
if I'm on the selling side and I am potentially working with an agent, hopefully, and they get me a contingent offer, I'm going to be looking at what their listings look like. How do you represent a
mm,
home? Because if it's not what I how I would hope to represent my own clients, I'm going to have something to say about that, hopefully, you would think.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like contingencies can get like in a small amount of time, 30 to 45 days, you're both selling your house and buying a new one. I just feel like there's so many moving parts in that situation. I'm not saying people should avoid it. Is there a way that
Mhm.
people can avoid it? Like, what if I could do a contingent or I didn't need to do a contingent? Maybe I
Yeah,
have,
there's times where you might be able to get approved for your financing for your next home without selling your current home. I would
mhm.
lean on my lending partners, of course, for that kind of advice. Um, there are ways you can pull equity out of your current home for, say, like a HELOC, home
Oh, yeah,
equity line of credit, so that you can tap into your home equity in order to make your down payment or whatever you need. Because a
that
lot of
makes
times
sense.
that's what people are banking on. They're selling their first home in hopes of taking those net proceeds and having as much of a down payment as possible, hopefully
Yeah,
20%. So their interest rates advantageous and all the other terms are great for them too.
yeah.
So that's another thing.
No, that totally makes sense. Yeah, it's something I didn't think about. Yeah, is there any, like this is a pretty succinct, topic. I think that every
Yeah.
situation is different, and like there's just so much that can go into it, but also just the regular gist of it. I think even people just understanding that is huge, and that's why we're doing this
Yeah, and
podcast.
there's so many different contingencies you can include in your offer, especially here in
Mm,
Washington State. And those are there to protect you as a buyer mostly. But
yeah.
like for this contingency, I would say you would want to eliminate as many contingencies as possible if you're including a home sale contingency, because
Okay.
that's one of the most risky ones a seller can accept.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, yeah, I guess I didn't think about that part either. Where like if you do submit a contingent offer to a seller saying like, "Hey, I need to sell my house before I can buy this," like, um, you talked about the performance of the agent, like how they market their home and stuff like that. But like more importantly, are things even selling in that in the place, the
Mhm.
location and the geographic location where you're selling your home? I mean, God, there's just so
Yeah.
much to consider. It seems like as a seller.
Yeah, you're not only relying on your own CMA, but also whatever the other agent's CMA looks like and what that house is going to do on the market.
Yeah. So do you think that sellers in this market right now should, uh, accept a contingent offer? Like, would you advise someone to, or is it just depend?
I'd say it depends. That's a great clause always. It really depends on what the other terms of the offer look like. I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you want to have the least amount of risk aside from that as a seller. But I
Hmm.
wouldn't say no to accepting one with the right terms in the right
Yeah.
scenario. And with days on market being a little stretched out compared to what they typically would in the spring and summer market, I
Yeah.
would say, yeah, you might as well try and get one sale potentially going and then maybe have somebody come along and bump them off of it and get a better offer or whatever it might look like. So you could, if you somehow get another offer while you're in contingent status
Yeah.
that
I
is
was just about to say that.
non-contingent, you can notify that contingent buyer and be like, hey, you're getting bumped by an offer that doesn't have a home sale contingency, and then they have
Yeah.
however many days to take that contingency out of their offer or waive their rights with that contingency, basically.
Okay. So basically, you can. So that was going to be like my another question I had, which was, okay, let's say we do have a buyer come along. You're contingent with you're under contract. Say like you're the seller. You're under
Mhm.
contract with me. I'm the buyer, but I have to sell my house. You're telling me that another person can come along and put in an offer that's not contingent on anything. They just are trying to buy the house, and they can bump me out of that place if I don't get my house
Yeah,
sold.
and the terms don't even have to be better, technically. It just as long as it's a non-contingent offer, that's technically a better offer for the seller.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can see how that would be. That would be disheartening too. So
And I
interesting.
would
Yeah,
and
there's
I wouldn't discourage a buyer from going that route either. I would just say you
Uh,
would want to have a very strong plan in place for how that looks. I mean, I usually recommend my clients that are trying to buy contingent to get their home ready to put on the market, have it ready to push live whenever you want, just have all the marketing in place, have it ready
right.
to go. And then as soon as you find a house that you want and are really excited about, go in there with your contingent offer and then get your home listed ASAP.
Yeah.
Provide the CMA and all the data that you can to that listing agent so they're confident in you.
Yeah. Sounds like, yeah. So there's a lot of moving parts. It's going to take, and I think when we talk about the true value of a realtor and people asking like, why do I pay a realtor? Like this is part of it. Like there's so much time involved in this and so many calls that have to be made and,
So many
follow ups
points of
and
negotiation.
just,
This is just
yeah,
one of
just,
them.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that people don't understand how much time that takes because like we all maybe that person has a job or whatever. It's like, well, then how much is your time worth? Do you have time? Do you have an extra hour and some change every day to just make phone calls, just that part, like just to,
Hmm.
and that's just that part. That's just getting in contact with somebody to do X, Y, and Z. Like, I don't know, I just think
Yeah.
that there's so much time involved in this and so many moving parts that especially a contingent offer. So yeah. Well,
Well, there's a lot of risks to consider from both sides, I'd say.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah, there's tons of risk. Well, tons of risk. As long as they get, there is risk. There's always risk. There's risk in
Mhm.
everything. It's just a matter of what you want to stomach, what you're willing to do. So a seller, doesn't have to. Does a seller have to take a contingent offer? They don't have to take a contingent offer, do they? They can
No, a
just
seller
not
doesn't have to
accept
take
it.
any offer they don't want, actually.
Right.
Seller doesn't have to take anything. If I'm the listing agent and they're not taking a list price offer, I'm going to be like, what's up? Like, you should be taking this offer. But yeah, they don't have
Yeah.
to take anything they don't want to.
Yeah. No, that's good to know. Well, that thank you for the contingency talk. There's a lot here. I mean, I'm sure, it's always situation dependent. There's definitely always more stuff to talk about, but I mean, we could go literally all day talking about all the different
Yeah.
ways and things that can happen. Um, if there's anything else that you think we missed, or if there's anything else that you'd like to say about contingency, yeah, let us
No,
know.
I'd just say if you're a buyer or seller thinking about a property sale contingency, to just know all your different routes and scenarios that could play out from there and
Hmm.
really know each line of that form or which forms you're using because there's so many different terms and clauses to consider in these forms and really know like the back of your hand if you're in
Yeah,
that scenario.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you for all of your information. And are you ready for the last segment of the show? Hot
Yeah, I
takes.
almost forgot this was going to happen.
Yeah. So this is good because the last two people, they're Maddie and Victoria were like ready for it. They're like, oh yeah, I remember. I was waiting for this. Anyway, um, let's go. So, hot dogs or hamburgers?
I'm a vegetarian, so this is a harder question. If I
Oh,
was thinking a
well, how
veggie
about
dog or a
veggie dogs?
hamburger,
Yeah. All right. How
I
about
would
this?
say I would say veggie dog.
Veggie dog? Okay, well, how about this?
Yeah,
Impossible or Beyond Meat? Beyond
neither.
Burger.
I want to say neither. Yeah,
Yeah.
a black bean burger is where it's at.
Okay. Black bean. Yeah. So
Yeah,
if I had to choose between the two, like, cause I've had, I don't like go searching for them. Like, I'm not like
yeah,
if there's burgers being served, I'd be like, hey, do you have like Impossible Burger meat?
yeah,
I go with the Impossible because I don't know the aftertaste of the Beyond for me just don't do it. I don't know. It feels like they tried to
yeah.
make it taste like charcoal, but it's not. It tastes like
I agree.
something else.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So
I've had Impossible Chicken and I really liked it.
I haven't
KFC
had
Impossible
Impossible
Chicken.
Chicken. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Burger King's Impossible Burger Whoppers actually kind of hits. Like I'm not gonna
I've
lie,
heard.
it kind of goes. All right. Summer suit blazer or a tank top?
Ooh, I'm gonna say summer suit blazer because I always like looking nice.
Okay. Beach
Tank top for the
volleyball.
pool.
Okay. Beach volleyball or gym volleyball?
Gym volleyball.
Okay. Last one. Watermelon flavor or grape flavor? Neither
We're
tastes like
talking.
the fruit.
We're talking artificial.
Yes, yes.
I'm gonna say grape because artificial watermelon flavored things I probably shouldn't have had before a certain age have ruined that for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how we have like banana, grape,
Yeah,
watermelon flavored stuff, and it don't even taste like the fruit like at all.
no,
You know, like
not at all.
nothing even close to it. It's crazy.
I
Um,
did love grape always. That was my go-to, so
oh yeah,
sure.
I love grape. Like grape anything, I love it.
Hmm.
Anyway, well, thank you for playing hot take. I know those were
Of
very
course.
inconsequential questions, but yeah,
Mhm.
you have 30 seconds to tell people how they can get back in contact with you if they want to know more about contingencies.
Yeah, sure. I'd say easiest way to get in contact with me is to DM me on Instagram. My ad is just Spencer_Eisman, my name. You can also call or text me at 253-254-6044. I'm always happy to chat over coffee or Zoom or whatever your preference might be.
All right, cool. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you jumping on the show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that does it for today's episode. Inside Abode podcast. Subscribe. We'll be back next week. Thank y'all, and we'll see you next time. All right, peace.
Thanks, Dave.
Yep. All right.